Hi, Panas. Welcome to a new edition of Panascope. Here says hi, Antonella Fonseca.
And Ricardo Andrade. Hello, friends.
So today we are going to dive in again in a summary of the events that had happened since 28th of July in Venezuela. And thank you for being here because we are very eager to tell you about all the things that had happened. Yeah, let's start with a summary of those elections and some key points.
Which is really hard to do because there's a lot of
Yes.
things going on, and
Yes.
every day, every hour is like happening a new thing in Venezuela or abroad related to Venezuela. So we'll do our best, and we'll do our best to reach our non-Spanish speaking audiences too. So yeah,
Hang on, hang on.
Yeah.
So let's start with a brief summary of the July 28 elections. So Nicolás Maduro proclaimed himself the winner with a 52% of the vote. On the other side, we have the opposition claiming that their candidate Edmundo González was the one who won. The National Electoral Council, on the other hand, have failed and keeps failing more than 50 days of fails to release the vote tallies as required by law. Important to understand that they communicated the results that give Maduro the um, the election, but they had to release all that information within a lapse of time that they have been failing to do so. So one of the things was a due diligence that the government of Maduro did with the Supreme Court to clarified those results. And what happened was that at the end, the Supreme Court asked the National Electoral Council to publish these numbers. They mention an alleged hack that are preventing them from disclose these results. But the reality is that they have also communicate results saying that they had 80% of the tally sheets from that day. So the discourse is not, how can we say that? It's not entirely coherent on that sense. So the opening question is, has this election deepened Venezuela's political and social crisis?
Yeah, that's a really hard question. And the thing is that the electoral power, as you said, Anto, has failed to publish disaggregated results, which is by law what they need to do, and it has to be done like in within 48 hours, and they failed to do so, and also they failed to proclaim and present results because proclaiming is nothing without grounds. But they have failed to do so also in the Gazette, the electoral Gazette, which had to be done.
30
it was
days.
supposed to be exactly
Yeah.
30 days after the election.
Mhm.
And even there was a recommendation by the Virgin
Supreme Court.
Supreme Court.
Mhm.
So they have failed in everything, in every aspect,
every
of,
aspect.
Their duties.
Yeah.
And on top of that, the opposition uploaded the body receipts. I mean, the tally sheets. They scanned the tally sheets and they published their results on a website. And what was proving in the case, it was pretty like obvious and apparent that the victory of Maduro was non-existent. What actually happened was the opposite. So Edmundo González Urrutia, according to the data, and that data is verifiable. I mean, it's published, and we can.
It's
contrast it.
online. It's public.
It's very open. He reached approximately 67% against 30% by Maduro. I mean, it was a landslide victory for the part of the opposition, and we need to be very clear with this. This is at least what the Edmundo González, the candidate, Edmundo González Urrutia, obtained within the unfair electoral system and conditions and circumstances that in which they were running. But if you consider the massive amount of Venezuelans abroad, which are at least, in age to vote, at least 4 million, And if you consider the minors that were not able to register for the election to vote in Venezuela, I mean, that would be 90% against 10% result. That would be, I mean, that would have been like even worse for the regime. And we need to consider that, because it's really, I mean, it helps you get the a bigger picture.
Yeah, right now I feel that one of the things that we have to bring here and discuss with our panas is that the voting tally sheets that are disclosed online, and there are public data that you can access, any person in the world can access, shows how that day the election was won by Edmundo González. So that the numbers, we know that if they would have had, like, let us get into the new register to vote abroad of Venezuela, it would have been even a higher number. But the reality, what we have is that 67% that shows that Venezuela wants a change. Important to say here that sometimes people think that dictatorships don't come off power just because they had elections. And it's true, and we believe you, and we understand that as Venezuelans. But it's important to say that this is the first time in Venezuelan history, in recent history, that we have the proofs that we won, and that they are elaborating the biggest fraud of this of the history, and not only Venezuelans history, but like the region. So that's, I think it's one of the things that we cannot miss here, because sometimes people around the world tend to disregard this situation with the proof of these votes, and it's like, no, we are defending 10 million voters, more than 10 million voters that went and expressed their will on the voting machines. Now we have the proof to tell, hey, this is what happened. And even if you are a person that is with the government, you know deep inside you that you want the truth, right? Like, really, if you are a fair person and you think about like the governability and why you need a change in Venezuela, because you must be suffering the same things all Venezuelans are suffering, you know that this can cut your attention, right? Like this is something that you're like, hey, can what is going on here? So the reality is that we have an opposition that is showing the tally sheets that are not the tally sheets of the opposition, are the tally sheets that their witnesses had with them, and they scanned and put it in this website for the world to see.
Tally sheets that were printed by the voting machine, so it
with
came
all
directly. It's
all the
official data.
security, with all the security tags that they had,
Hash codes, signature, digital signature from the witnesses. So it's impossible to hack, by the way.
Oh, very less likely, at least.
Yeah.
So what happened to Edmundo González, Ricardo?
Well, that's the thing. He was basically forced to exile, to be exiled, to flee from the country, if you can put it that way, and to seek for political asylum. And it's been, again, it has become apparent that it was forced because, I mean, to be an exile is not a willing decision, it's not a voluntary decision, but it's really obvious that he was so uncomfortable to have within the country that the regime needed him to be abroad, be outside the country.
Mm-hmm.
So the information that Edmundo González Urrutia himself has provided is that he went to the Netherlands embassy from day one after the election, and he remained there during a month approximately. But the government was very interested in having him outside the country. So
Maduro's government,
Maduro's regime. So they looked for a way to negotiate his fleeing. So he, after being during a month in the Netherlands embassy, he went to the Spain embassy, where he had conversations with regimes, agents, and figures, prominent figures like the vice president
and her brother.
And his brother, yeah, the president of the Congress. And so that ended in González Urrutia being in Spain. The thing is that in Spain, being free and with some capability of action and movement that he didn't have
in Venezuela,
Venezuela, now he's trying to make the
connections,
the conversations with European leaders. So he has been recognized as the elect president by the parliament, the Spanish parliament, the Italian parliament, and now the European Parliament
Union
as a whole. So those are recognitions that are very interesting and concerning for the regime. We're sure, because in this case, unlike other cases in the past, we have not only the support of the majority, the electoral majority in Venezuela, but also like you have been said, until the material proof, the material evidence of that support. And that's something difficult to dismiss or ignore by the world, by the governments, by the world in general. So now, he's gaining more and more recognition from other countries. That's
and not only the recognition for Edmundo González, but also for the Venezuelan civilians in the country. Sure. The fact-finding mission report highlighted a whole situation in Venezuela. I'm going to quote this. This is the report of the Independent International Fact-Finding Mission in Venezuela, and says, an unprecedented level of repression is plunging Venezuela into one of the most acute human rights crises in modern history. This situation with the political prisoners that arose, 1,700 political prisoners after the elections. We are talking about July 28th. That was a couple months ago. The crackdown was brutal. They kept held about 120 teenagers and children as young as 13 years old, still remaining under arrest about 68 as we record this on September 28th. Important to say that a lot of the prisoners with this crackdown have been taken to maximum security prisons on their horrible, inhumane conditions. These prisons are Yare 3, Tocorón, and Tocuyito. If you go on Google and Google about them, you might find a lot of information about it. It's complicated because we are talking about people that was protesting or not, and they were taken, they were arrested, they were held for a long period of time where their families could not approach them. Some of them are still not in contact with their families or private lawyers that can handle their cases. So it has been a lot in these couple months. Also, some politicians that are under arbitrary detentions are being held in the Helicoide. That is the largest torture center in Latin America. There's also this trend right now to clean the face of El Helicoide. So please be aware that we have not only the testimonies of a lot of people that have been held there, but also very serious investigations about what happened in what is happening between those walls. So be careful with the information, because we are seeing that with a lot of concern from abroad. There's like this trend of cleaning and wiping the face of a horrible torture center. So those are the things that are happening there. And also, one of the things is that this things that the report of the Independent International Fact-Finding Mission on Venezuela says about the whole systematic persecution that is happening is a state-sponsored effort to eliminate opposition and instill fear among population. There are registered 25 deaths, and 24 of them are by gunshot, and the other one is a person that died because of a brutal beaten up situation. So it's hard to talk about these issues, but we have to reflect on them, and we have to highlight them, because this seems like a new thing about the Venezuela's government handling the situation with the opposition or the civilians. But this is not new, right? Has been happening since Hugo Chavez government, but it was in different conditions, and there were never investigations as the ones they are leading today in our country that can reflect on these issues.
And also, this time has been even more acute and rapid. I mean, the systematic violation of human rights in Venezuela has been going on since at least 2010, probably, or even before that. But in 2014 and 2017 were like brutal peaks of violations. But now we're seeing that it has been happening within the frame time of
2 months,
or less than that.
Yes.
I mean, in just 1 week after the election was like the 90% of all these crimes against humanity.
And they are also being persecuted, and they are accusing them of terrorism.
Even children, to
children, incitement of hatred and treason. So there are many things going on here. Also, political prisoners include journalists that were doing their job, and suddenly they are now some of them disappear because they haven't talked to their families. Then they appear and they give some information to the families, but families haven't seen them.
They disappeared people.
We have politicians, journalists, human rights activists, and we also have I think it's about 150 women, if I'm not wrong, that are also in prison. And same thing, the conditions they are under are completely inhumane,
and with no legal assistance.
Yeah. So yeah, all these things of the United Nations fact-finding mission and other resources that we are seeing these days, and that you might probably be hearing about, are because they are highlighting the brutal situation after the election, the crackdown on the regular everyday citizens. And I feel that that's part of what we are seeing from the international community, part of the reactions on one hand, but we also have some things about sanctions and international pressure.
And there's also an ongoing investigation from the criminal court, the International Criminal Court, against the Maduro regime, starting with Maduro himself and other officers of the regime,
like Diosdado Cabello, or which is the prime is the Minister of Interior and Justice. And then we have Vladimir Padrino Lopez, that is the defense minister.
And this includes, for the first time, investigations ordered by other republics, like the case of Argentina. And Argentina, as a state, is asking for the International Criminal Court to act against Maduro, Diosdado Cabello, and these prominent figures of the regime to be incarcerated. So on top of this, we're seeing sanctions, and this is a very controversial topic because sanctions don't have a good press, and it's because in 2017 and later 2019, there have been a couple of sanctions that have been targeted to the financial system in Venezuela. And that caused some, damages to the
population,
the general population, to the general infrastructure of economy in Venezuela. But now we're seeing more individually targeted sanctions that can be a little bit different. We don't know yet, but it's true that it seems like these sanctions are oriented not only to punish but to prevent others to keep committing these crimes. It's like a way to say the world's watching and we are taking actions. And it's the let's say positive things about these sanctions, if we can say that, is that they are individual. So they are
Not
oriented,
affecting the people of Venezuela?
not affecting the general population, but oriented towards the assets of individuals within the armed forces.
The millionaire assets?
Yeah, and you can it's like a very naive question, but you can ask it still, like why these people is
These
buying
agents,
houses in
yeah.
Miami and
Million of dollars.
Madrid and,
Yeah.
yeah, why?
And why their families live abroad?
Exactly, that's
Right.
another question.
That's another question.
And one of the things that some people are like trying to promote is that the orchestrated action in this sense, like not only the U.S. sanctions, like U.S. based sanctions, but otherwise like rather more general coordinated among other
Efforts,
countries,
right?
efforts. So, yeah, like it's. I mean, thanks to journalistic investigations. We now know that Diosdado Cabello, for example, has a lot of properties in Spain. So I think one of the things that they're discussing at an international level is like, well, why don't we act in a coordinated effort to
pressure,
yeah, to pressure through actions and
to individuals,
towards individuals.
Yeah,
Exactly.
because that's part of the whole situation, right?
Yeah.
Like
we still don't know if how this is going to affect the regime. How is
the
this
length
is going
of
to
this.
undermine the regime? But definitely is something that is being.
It's in good news. It's
no,
in good news.
No,
Yeah.
no. And
For them.
The international community has to try other things as well, because I mean, try things that that have not worked in the past, because the sanctions has been ongoing from 2018 2017, and the result is not exactly the expected result.
Also they have some agents that now, because of these journalist investigations, we know that have acted on behalf of the Venezuelan government and have facilitated things inside the country for them. And that is also like a thing that with this individual sanctions, I feel that for example, the U.S. government is trying to persecute, like, okay, you are going to do business on behalf of who, how, and no, this money. Also, we have to say, United States has to figure it out and have to put some things on the table as there are negotiations with Chevron for oil, Venezuelan oil, because you cannot sanction people and keep doing businesses with these people. So that's part of the things that I feel Biden administration has to figure it out. I know that he mentioned it during the General Assembly at the United Nations. So we hope that their efforts and discourse can be coherent enough to cause an effect on this change that we will want to see in our country.
Yeah, you're totally right. And I think that the international community is moving towards another stage, like a new stage. It's like, okay, we're asking for actas for a while, no response about it. We've been like trying to make strong statements and like warnings. Now it's time to move forward and to take some actions, and that includes probably what you've been saying, like the financial structures, also to try to dismantle the illicit sources of
activities,
funding and activities that the regime has.
Narco
trafficking, and not only drug but also mineral, like gold trafficking and all those bad stuff that they do.
And as well, I feel that we need to talk about humanitarian crisis and migration, because this situation we already had, before the election, more than 7.7 million Venezuelans living abroad, and we are not tourists. A lot of us are fleeing or flee our country, seeking refuge from political persecution and economic collapse in our country. So right now, and after the 28th of July, I not only feel as a Venezuelan, but I also saw, and we're seeing people leaving the country again in mass, yeah, in a mass movement, because, well, they are still in the election and people wanted a change, and I'm being persecuted because I posted something online about Maduro's regime, or I'm being persecuted because I was a witness in a polling station, or I'm being persecuted because I used to work for a company of a public company, and they told me to report my vote and I didn't, and now they suspend my salary and now I have to flee. So there are so many things going on, and every story has an yeah, like a flex point where it's like, okay, not anymore, I have to go. I have two kids, one kid, or not any kids, I just want to go. And I feel that this is also something that countries of the region are seeing and are making them more cautious in the positions they take towards Venezuelan position.
Particularly Colombia and Brazil.
Because Colombia and Brazil, they've been trying to partner up with Venezuela to talk about a transition, a negotiated transition. They haven't said that Nicolás Maduro is a president, but they are trying to know to gain time and try to have these conversations. Maduro is ignoring them. And at the same time, these are the two countries that receive the most of the migrants from Venezuela, right? Also, we have countries like Panama, Chile, um, Argentina, Peru, that know the 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 hardship of the situation of receiving more people in their countries, because they have also their own problems, right? And they are seeing how, well, I remember a couple years ago it was devastating to see Venezuelans fleeing Venezuela because of medical issues. That's still happening, but right now, like, the main issues are, well, the political persecution and the systematic persecution. So I need to go, I need to flee. But the situation with the medical resources in Venezuela is devastating. And same thing, people will walk thousands of kilometers to get to a hospital where they can find care for their loved ones. And that's so hard on every government, because it's not one or two or 200 people, millions of Venezuelans trying to get the the attention, the medical attention that they require to keep living. So I feel that that's why they're being so cautious about this in this moment, about this situation, because they know that if they disregard the situation as they've done in the past, they're gonna have millions of people there. And it's, I mean, as a Venezuelan, it's difficult for me as well to like recognize that, yeah, we can be a burden, because it's the same thing as if someone says, like, hey, I have to leave my house and I'm going there with my entire family and there are 10 people, right? Like, I don't have the means to maintain 10 people. And that's one of the things that we are seeing on a mass scale in different countries.
Chile has been very clear about it. Like, the president Gabriel Boric has been like very strong and firm against the dictatorship in Venezuela, and he has called it that way with all the letters. And but now he's like also recognizing that, I mean, we have 800,000 of Venezuelans in Chile, and we cannot afford more Venezuelans here.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that that's the only reason, because he is like standing up with Venezuelan people.
Yeah.
But it's something important in the equation. You have to consider it. Honestly.
Yeah, it's because this impacts all the countries, neighbors of Venezuela, impacts United States as well. Right now, we are seeing this matrix of opinion that Venezuelans living in the U.S. are causing a massive problem because of the infamous Tren de Aragua, and how this criminal gang is taking over communities. And we're like, wait a second, Like, what is going on? And we are all part of the same thing, with the difference that when we left our country, or many people left our country, did it because of the economic, political, and social collapse. And these people is in these criminal activities is now trying to get a hold of the situation to profit, because they are profiting on Venezuelans as well. So it's like, how they do that? Well, they are trying to control the human trafficking situation. They are trying to control a lot of things that involve refugees in these countries. So there are many things that are happening, and it's difficult to keep a tab on every little thing. But yeah, the region, that what I think what we're trying to convey here is that the region needs to step up and really accompany Venezuela and the democratic forces in generating this change, because we can be on board in one thing, and is that a lot of Venezuelans would love to go back to their country, to our country. A lot of Venezuelans would like to reunite with their families, and most of Venezuelans are not criminals and want a dignifying life. So that's one of the things
Yeah,
that
it's terrible. It's really sad what is happening to the Venezuelan people, because the Venezuelan people has clearly said we want to change. We
Mhm.
need a transition to democracy, and the regime is clearly ignoring that claim because of their convenience and survival, basically. And then you have other governments and political actors trying to instrumentalize this tragedy and
Mhm.
criminalize Venezuelans abroad. And Venezuelan people is like in the middle, like, okay, no one is
Yeah,
taking.
it's like, I don't have a passport, a valid
Yeah.
passport, because I don't have an embassy
And my
here.
rights are totally.
What are my
Yeah,
rights in
what are my
this
rights?
other country? Because we all know that when you don't have a valid passport in any place of the world, it can be very difficult to fulfill different procedures to stay legal in a country or other stuff. So
And the regime is not only ignoring the people's will, but also violating their
mhm.
rights,
Yeah.
our rights, and also it's become clear that it's very convenient for the government to expel Venezuelans.
Yeah, yeah, like they do, like they
It's not
did with
political.
Edmundo González, right? Like,
Yeah, exactly.
okay,
It's like
if
a policy. Yeah,
mhm.
we need to get rid of these, people that won't change. We don't need. We need that. We
Yeah,
need that.
yeah.
And it's really sad because this is causing a humanitarian crisis that is a coordinated effort from the regime. It's not like only inefficiency. This is very controversial. We can discuss about it later, but it looks like a very systematic policy, or it's a mixture of inefficiency and political coordination against people,
Like
like
when
to have
something,
to have people living miserably.
yeah, like when something works for you that you didn't know you needed, but now that you're doing it, you keep doing it.
Maybe, maybe. And it's really sad because I think that many people were like expecting the election, waiting for the election to see if they took the decision, took the choice of
Mhm.
leaving the country or not. And once this happened, and they're seeing that
The
the
crackdown
regime is,
afterward.
yeah, the crackdown, and the regime is trying to stubbornly steal the election, people said like, "What? This was our last chance, and we need to move forward."
And Ricardo, do you think Venezuela can find a peaceful resolution, or will this whole scenario that we just pictured here deepen the crisis? In a very personal statement.
I think so, but we can do it alone. We need the global support
Mhm.
of our friends, allies, because Venezuelan people is fighting against criminal experts, and basically as a political class formed or based on gangsters principles,
Mhm.
like people that knows very well how to threaten people, incarcerate people, torture, and get profit of it. So, and they have the arms, they have the weapons. So it's really hard. I think it's possible and feasible and actually pretty convenient for
For the
everyone in the
regime,
region.
right?
But we cannot be alone. What do you think about it?
I feel the same way. I feel that well, we are aware of what's going on, and I feel that's one of the premises of this space of Fanoscope is like stay informed, um, because it's difficult to stay on the side of this regime. It's difficult as a person. I mean, Gabriel Boric, the Chilean president, he said it. He said it like we don't have to choose between barbaric events. We have to choose humanity, and I felt that is part of what I've been thinking as a citizen of Venezuela and the world. Like we cannot choose the bad guy's side. And how do you know that Venezuela government is the bad guy? Oh, I have some reports that I can share with you and that I can talk about, if you will. And that's when you realize that yeah, you cannot step behind people like this that is causing so much harm and in a brutal level to its citizens. Also, I feel that we need the support of the entire international community to take Edmundo González to the presidency on January the 10th. That's the other part of it. Between now and that date, which would be the day they would impose a presidential ban. Yeah, are many days in between, too much water under the bridge. And Venezuelan people, we don't have time for that. I know we say this and we might not understand like all the things that should happen for a real change. But the reality is that our country cannot stand 6 more years of Maduro or any other character similar to him that can take over him, so people might think that, oh, okay, they changed the president. No, we need a systematic change of a lot of things, and that's part of what is going on right now. We are trying to recover our democracy, and I feel that every person that has something to share with that process is doing it. We had interviews with Giuseppe Gangi, Orlanis Barreto, Carla Alvarenga till the moment, and all of them from every, like, the communication side, the data sharing with Giuseppe MacedoniaDelNorte.com website. Orlan is doing the activist job, in human right activist job with women in Venezuela. Like, all of them are putting abroad and inside the country are putting their best efforts to take Venezuela to a different level, to the next best thing we can do. And I feel that's part of what Venezuelans need to do, because we already said, like, we need the international support. Of course, we need it. But we also need to understand as Venezuelans that we are the ones that are main characters in this whole situation. We're not in the back seeing what these people is going to decide. Because the reality is that those votes, the public data that we're talking about, are there available to the public because people like us scan those tally sheets and make that available. So
within and without the country.
Yeah, so it's like a collaborative effort of all Venezuelans to stand there and keep showing every time to tell you that we want to recover our democracy and recover our country.
As a final remark, now that you have mentioned Giuseppe Gangi's extraordinary work, we can straighten out how extraordinary is the work that Giuseppe is doing. But now he has released 700 videos of people reading aloud their results
of every table,
of every tally sheet of tally sheets, and they match with the tally sheets that the opposition released, the official tally sheet that they have published, which is like a scientific demonstration that those tally sheets
voting records are valid,
completely valid, and he has like a very strong scientific grounds to claim that. And because the sample exceeds like 3% or 4% of the overall data.
We can talk further about that.
Absolutely.
And explain to our audience more about it, because really it's very interesting what Ricardo is saying. Like, his work is something that came from what citizens made, and
Yep.
now he's putting that as a disaggregated website where he has all the results by state, by politic party, by, well, with videos that can show that the information that they read, and he can also he's also highlighting like the error, the human error margin that that is present, which is so important because we are humans, and when we typing stuff, we might type the number that's wrong, but he has all this collected all these proofs that can tell you the result and what was happening on that table that night. So that's awesome, and that's part of the collaborative efforts that I'm talking about,
including a poll station where Maduro won. It was hard to find it,
oh,
but
the video.
they found it. Thank God they found it.
Yeah.
And yeah, like you said, it helps to gain more like certainty to the data that they have collected. And to me, this is like the epitome of citizen verification, a citizen verification process.
And public data, that it's
and public data and transparency.
Transparency. Yeah, I feel that this in the future would be part of of a lot of things that we as the people can do to recover democracies. Even if you have an imperfect democracy, it's something to look at.
We the people. Exactly. And I think that's another important thing, and we can stress enough that either, like, this is not a far left, a right left discussion. This is a democracy versus dictatorship, like people against an autocratic regime. So we need to put that in perspective. This is like, of course, ideology is everywhere, but this goes way beyond ideology. We need to stand with the people.
Yeah. Well, I think we're gonna end this
like
right
summary.
Here, like a summary. We told you about it. We were gonna do our best efforts. Thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting Panascope, and thank you for staying informed and share.
Thank you for staying tuned with us, and thank you very much for your time.